So we are going to start with, if I can find it, our B grade open.
Funny how I do lots.
If you're not Craig McKenzie, would you all please mute yourself or make sure you're muted? Otherwise, you're coming through in the middle of it all here in the room.
So Craig, this is B grade open.
Okay. Now, all right. I probably won't be able to tell you the results anymore because I thought they were all stored away on your computer system somewhere, but I'll just talk about them anyway. I did quite enjoy this one because it's got a nice mixture of crisp birds that are silhouetted plus the motion of the birds flying in, and there's birds filling up most of the sky. Through tonight, I'll give you a few ideas of maybe something you can try. I don't necessarily say it would work, but what I'd like to try with that one is if you just try boosting a bit more contrast or lightening up the sky, it may brighten the image up and make it more interesting, unless you really wanted to get that sort of dull grey look to the sky.
And result?
Yeah, well, I only put the results into your website. So I haven't got them written down anywhere other than there.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can find that on the website. Craig, did you say you finished doing the judging?
Yeah, I did. Just I was even changing things just a few minutes before the meeting started. Luckily, all the ones that I changed at the end went up, so should be happy with that.
I'll just have to see if I can find it.
Actually, I've found them.
Oh, excellent.
Right, that one got a merit.
Merit.
Yeah, I've got to get my live Zoom back again. Right, the next one's of the concert. I really quite enjoyed this one. And it's quite interesting now to see the way you're sharing it on your screen because it had such black edges. When I was looking at it, it just disappeared into the black. I couldn't tell where the edges are, but I see it's a panorama of just all the crowd and the lights. So I thought that was quite a clever way of doing a photograph and quite striking. So that one got, we'll get good at this in shortly. I gave that one an honours. And then when we look at the next one, it actually works quite well at that one we had two ago, where all the birds on the trees, and now we've just got one. So it does give it a real impression of alone after that. One thing I wondered about, it's sort of hard to know whether you center the bird up in the frame or you center the tree up. I just wonder about a wee crop down the left just to center the tree. That's another thing I'd try and just see which one I like the best. That one gets a merit. And now we're on to beach days. This is quite good. It's quite taking a photograph of something moving using slow shutter speed to get enough sharp enough and it's enough movement. And it's quite good. The face of the dog's nice and sharp. Unfortunately, for the balance, it's a wee bit far to the left edge. You could crop in from the right to sort of center it up a wee bit, but I can understand why you've left that side as well, because you've got that nice kick up of the sand going up that really adds to the motion as well. So there's quite a lot of good things going on in there. So maybe the cropping's just a wee bit too tight, but it still gets a merit.
we will move on to our B grade set subject. Quick run through to start.
Right? Yeah. On the B grade subject.
Okay, I'm just doing a wee bit of a shuffle around to my screens, and I might be able to get both things at the same time. Right. So now we've got a picture of a tern in flight. It's an interesting tern to me. It doesn't quite look like a one-fronted tern. I couldn't quite tell what it is, but it's nice and in the center, and it's got a very nice muted background. I'll probably talk about backgrounds a bit tonight. And ideally with natural history, I want either two sorts. I want something that's doesn't distract from the main subject, or something that gives some environment. What we want to try and avoid is the middle one, which is distracting backgrounds, but doesn't actually add anything to it. So this one's got a nice muted background, so just lets the tern stand out. And I think Jeff fooled me a bit when he sent this. He called this set subject history or nature. And I thought, oh, history, that's an interesting subject. So I went through and judged them just as nature quite loosely. And then I found your definition of natural history or nature. So I've changed my judging to natural history or nature, which I think is what Jeff meant. But I was going to say there's a wee white spot just on that right-hand edge. It's a light spot that drags my eye a wee bit. I think your rules don't allow you to do that, but toning that down would improve that image. And I've given that one a highly commended. There's some beautiful detail in the butterfly on this one. We can see the wings, the flower. It's all nice and sharp, possibly even too sharp to almost look unnatural, but butterflies often do have a bit of an unnatural look to them. And this is probably an example of the background on this one is muted, not really distracting, but gives an idea of the habitat that the butterfly is living in. So that one gets a highly commended. Now, this is, I'll probably talk about this one a bit longer. One of the things I really like to do, if you can, when you get your subjects, especially birds, is you can get down onto their level. It really does allow us to interact with them and gives them so much more. Oh, I've forgotten the word, but it makes them stand out more, a whole lot more. So the background, you can blur out your backgrounds and become much more intimate with them. You're down at their level. With this one, you know, the bird, everything's quite good. The background, we can see what it is, but it's not too distracting. But I'm not sure. I get a slight tint thinking this is a bit down on the left-hand side when I look at it. And one of the techniques that I use to do that, you know, we've got your straighten tools and your editing programs. Normally, if you do something vertical, you can always also straighten up verticals. So if you can find a point like the point of the beak and drag down to the reflection of the point of the beak, that should be vertical. And you see if that comes out straight, then you know you have got it right. So that's just a wee tip for getting everything lined up when you're not quite sure with reflections in water really where real horizontal is. And that's a merit. And this one comes very similar. It's a similar idea that in some ways, by looking down, you get all those reflections in the water. And this one's a bit of a tricky one. It's hard to say whether it's distraction or becomes all quite arty with all those trunks and branches reflecting in it. So it just depends what you're looking for. But if you can get down, like those beautiful colours on the bird could really pop if it was just against a blurred, more of a blurred out background. That one also gets a merit. It's a very simple image. It looks like it definitely is black and white. There's enough detail in the bird to see the tips of the wings, the feathers on the tips of the wings and the beak. So there's enough detail there. But to me, it's probably just a wee bit too simple. So I've given that one an acceptance. Probably this is one of those ones where I was talking about your backgrounds is almost a bit intermediate. It's quite a bit of contrast in the grasses and things. So the heron doesn't stand out quite so much. If we want the heron to really stand out from that, it would have to be super sharp around the eye. So it really does pop from that background. So it's a bit of that in-between background being plain and simple and giving us more information about where the heron lives. But the sharpness on the bird is adequate, so that one gets an acceptance. Right, so now we're starting to probably get a bit better. This here, the photographer has got down, it's starting to get down low to the bird, so that's pushed the bird up against the background, which is a long way away, so it's become completely out of focus, so the bird really stands out against the background. And as well as that, we've actually caught the bird doing something, having a wing stretch, possibly, maybe taking off, but probably a wing stretch, I'd imagine. And there could be room for actually even getting lower on that one, and just, if you could even get lower, I know it's hard to get up again, we still struggle with that as we get older. Then you would have the bird completely against that nice grey background and it would really stand out. Even so, I've given this one an honours. The water drop's an idea that people do take reasonably often, but often it's with something in the background. So if you can look close enough, you can look, it will be, I suppose it's refracted in the droplet, so you can see the subject behind. The way it's presented here, I find the water droplet's probably a bit too small to really look at the water droplet, and then the surroundings is not really enough to hold my interest in the surroundings. So maybe if you can, try something like that, and if you can see if you can actually get something to reflect back into the, typically it's a daisy or something, a flower, but you can try something else. I'm not sure what. There's something there in the water droplet to look at. I've given that one an acceptance. And this is definitely an example of what I was talking about, where the background is enough to show us the habitat of where these birds live. And you've been very lucky or skillful to time it right. So you've got all the birds are pretty much in a line. So you've got them all in focus, all three birds in focus. And also done well to have that most left-hand bird just up above the ground. So it is nicely contrasted against the more distant mountains rather than getting lost in the foreground mountains. And when I look closely, I see there's even a fourth bird further away down the bottom right. So this one gets a merit. I did get this one had me looking. I kept looking at that. There's some nice light on the water, and then we've got the clouds on the water. That's quite an interesting phenomenon. But then I started looking to the clouds. The clouds are really white and fluffy, and I just kept looking for something, but I didn't know what I was looking for and didn't manage to find it. So I think maybe somewhere in there it needs something just a wee bit stronger to tie it together, something to actually look at. So I've given that one an acceptance. There's some lovely backlighting coming through this fungi, showing you can see on the far side we can see the gills, and there's a nice translucency there. But I think this is one of those ones where we probably need a bit of a tidying up, a bit of gardening or a different background, because we've got all these white out of focus bits of stick or something making these distracting patterns. So this is an example of the background detracting from the subject, and we've got that green one going across. Now you can either get in there and do a bit of gardening and move a few things out before you take it, change your background, or sometimes you don't want to actually disturb things that are living. You don't want to pull out living things that damage living things. But sometimes just off to the frame, you can put a stone or put your camera bag and just hold them down out of the way for a while, or use some techniques just to move things out of the way while you take your photograph. I find I do that sort of thing quite often. That's an acceptance. So I was looking at this one for quite a while. I'm not quite sure what's been done with it. It's not quite in focus, but the birds themselves have got quite a painterly look, almost as if they've been overcropped, over enlarged, but then that same sort of over enlargement and grain and stuff isn't showing up in the background. So I was sort of intrigued with that. But I think this one falls foul of your actual rules for natural history with too much man-made in it. So I've passed this one in. I think that's what you're supposed to do with those, isn't it? It's a nice detail on the frog, and it's got its throat all puffed up. That's nice. The background behind the frog is all very nice. I like that, the way it just fades off, gives it an idea of habitat. But unfortunately, we've got a couple of wee out of focus bits of green, and one of them is actually covering the frog up of it. I would like to have you could probably moved slightly to the left. Maybe we could have got that left foot in the gap between the. Maybe that would have probably helped. Yeah, this one gets an acceptance. And certainly here now we're definitely getting down to the bird's level. So far, even the foreground is even obscuring it slightly. When I first looked at this, I was going to say, well, what I'd like you to do for this one is to just crop in from the right-hand side to remove that slight wee piece of something that's jutting in there above the white sand, and then clone out the sticks from the other side. And that will give the real impression of this bird sitting in the big wide expanse of the beach or wherever it is. Whereas the way it is at the moment, those wee things are a wee bit detracting, but then I see that's probably not against it, not allowed in the rules. But because you've got down nice and low and given a slightly different sort of a viewpoint, putting the bird low and lots of sky, giving it lots of space, this one highly commended for this one. Probably what I might do, just talk about the other one just briefly. I just looked at the titles. I didn't look at them to start with. I sort of was looking at these mostly on a more loose nature things, and Little Dot probably isn't a suitable natural history title, really. You should name it. It's the type of dot what it is. And I think I saw another one back further that maybe they're one of the clouds just saying floating, maybe not quite a natural history title. Anyway, we'll come on to this lovely owl photograph. We've got the feathers all fluffed up, looking really nice. And those startling eyes, you just can't beat those nice bright yellow eyes staring back at you. And then we've got a nice muted background, everything's sort of out of focus, which is quite nice. You've got some leaves in there to just hide a lot of that light sky. And there's even some out of focus leaves that are in the foreground, but they're so out of focus that they just blend in. We can just look through it. It's the magic of a telephoto lens, the way sometimes it can just look through things by making them out of focus, and then we look through and see what's sharp. So I've given that one a highly commended. These birds can be tricky with that really bright beak, but the way they're nearly white is really, that really takes your eye and tells you to look the head of the bird and then the beak points down, and then you can start looking at the chicks and you can find 3 chicks there. And it's really quite a dark image, quite a low key image. But that's probably a wee bit distracted by those green leaves off to the right-hand side. And I think it could be quite easily cropped a bit by coming in from the bottom right, taking off some of the left and some of the bottom, which would actually remove some of that man-made netting there to make it a bit more natural. But no doubt the birds have chosen to nest there, so we can live with something man-made in that situation. But by taking away that distraction of the leaves and bringing it back into the face, I think that would really help that one. But it still gets a merit.
And we will shift on to, oh, we don't have Be Great Creative. We'll be moving on to a grade set subject. Quick run through.
Some hope. Yeah.
Okay, well, now we're definitely getting down low to the bird. We're getting at the level of the bird. We get that nice intimate look at the bird. The only sort of bit of a distraction from this one, when I looked at it closely, I could see there maybe not quite enough high enough shutter speed, because you can see movement in the reflection of the beak. It just looks like the beak has moved slightly. So you got to, if you got movement, you got to try and keep your shutter speeds up. I've given that one a merit. So maybe your A grade people have got the idea of getting level with the bird, because once again, we've got a silver eye, and even though it's not on the ground, we're right at the level, the branch is sort of right at eye level. So we're looking right at it. And there's some nice detail, nice rim light from a bit of backlighting on the bird, and a dark background with just a wee bit of texture to it, but nothing that's going to draw our eye away from the subject. The merit. This is a titled A Picture of the Lake, and I think this is a bit of just an awkward distance from the lake I think you've taken while it's the lake. you're close to it, so you can't see where the lake lives in the surrounding countryside. You just see the water. But there is some lovely, interesting steam and so forth in amongst the foliage in the background. So I think the photograph is actually further away than what you've taken it, so you'd have to zoom in to make a more interesting photograph. I think it's just an awkward distance that doesn't really hold my interest. I want to be able to look further into it, but I can't really see that far. So I'm giving that one an acceptance. There's some beautiful morning or evening light on this one. Lovely and warm on the tussocks underneath the trees. Nice line of trees, just nicely spread out. The basically quite a light sky has been quite well handled by just having little pieces of it, so it's not a big light area near the frame that takes your eye away. Then we've got that inky dark water reflecting things, and gives us, when we look into the reflection, we can see more of the trees, we can see the tops of the trees, and we can see there is some interesting cloud and colour in the sky. So I really enjoyed this photograph. I think it's really nice, and this is the one I've given the first place for tonight.
We'll be adding the placement after. No, I think I have to do that after. Oh, sorry. I'm still learning.
Aren't we all? So photography is something you keep learning your whole life. And photography is all about light. And here we've got a bee on the flowers, which is, the bee's quite nicely rendered, but it's almost into the darker part of the frame, whereas all the light is on the top of the flower. So there's a lighter area on top of the flower, which tends to be what attracts your eye first rather than the bee. They're just the kind of things you've got to think about. I know often when you're talking about people's photographs, I tend to always think about the negatives, but I'm not trying to say negative about the photograph. I'm just trying to give you things to think about for next time you're out doing something similar to how you can actually improve on this photograph. Yes, it is. I've given it a merit. And very often, the white stalks of grasses and things are really quite distracting in a photograph. But in this case, it's really all part of the story, because that's exactly where the nursery web spider builds its web. So as a photograph of a web, it's fine. It shows the web. To improve these sorts of things, I think if you go out to these at night, you'll very often find the female spider sitting on the outside of the web, guarding it. Or even later on, if you can see when they come a bit translucent and see some wee spiderlings crawling around inside it, they're the kind of thing you've got to look for to try and lift it up to the next level. This one's an acceptance the way it is now. Once again, we're at getting pretty low and level with the ribble. And I really enjoyed the shutter speed the photographers managed to use here, because we can see there's movement in the wings. The wings have got a slight blur to them through movement, and even the bodies are a wee bit blurred through movement as it's leaping up. But the head has stayed nice and still and stayed nice and sharp. So that's nice to see the eyes sharp. So that really works for a photograph like that. I think birds are quite good the way they can move around, but their head stays exactly still. I don't know, you may have seen people when they pick a chicken up and move it around and the head stays in the same place. As photographers, we can really take advantage of that by knowing that birds are quite good at keeping their head still when we can use slow shutter speeds. And I like that one so much, I've given that one second place. Did you all go out on a frog photographing field trip at some stage? There's been quite a few frogs in tonight. This one, I enjoyed the background and where it was sitting. and the placement of the frog is good. Everything's quite good, except there's so much detail on these frog skins that I would really quite like to see it. See all that detail, and just see all that detail. This photograph needs to be a wee bit sharper, I think. And if it was sharp and had all that detail, it would be really nice. So for that slight lack of sharpness on the frog, it gets an acceptance. And it was the similarity of shapes and flow of the nesting material that the starlings got, all the dead grass sort of flying down with a slight curve in it. I just thought that just looked exactly like the feathers on the back of the bird. So I like that, seeing that same pattern repeated. And for that, I get a merit. Gets a merit. And it's, once again, that's in, there is some human part of the, it looks like weatherboards, and it's sitting on a wicker chair or something. But the bird's freely gone there, and that's the environment it lives in these days. So that doesn't worry me too much, or at all, really. Did I say they got a merit?
Yes, you did.
I did.
I was letting you
Oh.
finish talk about it.
Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes I think of something else to say. This one, once again, this is a nice background with a nice habitat. Shows where the herons are nesting. There's a nice bit of behaviour with one of them bringing in a bit of nesting material. All I can like to say with these is these are white birds, and they should look white. So I would suggest you have another look at this one and grab your whites and really bring your whites up and try and make those birds look white. It's good to protect your highlights when you're actually taking them and making sure you don't blow them out. But when you get back at home to your computer, try and boost the whites back up so they are nice and white. Give this one a merit. So we'll start here with a nice, I'm sort of starting with the background and anyways moving to the subject. There's a nice background. There's just some really nice still water with interesting patterns. Then we come to the bird, and I just love the way that its head, you can see poking out in front of its wing, from under its wing. We can see the face, and the beak's open. We can see it's coming down to pick something. So we can't actually see it grabbing anything. We've got that real implied movement and action going on. So I really enjoyed that, and given that one an honours. See, there were a lot of frogs, weren't there? This one, now we can look at this one, we can see there's so much detail in the skin, all those wee bumps and warts and all sorts of things, and the eyes quite detailed, and then it's green against the red background, which is a nice contrasting colour. And the way the background and the leaves are working, they're all sort of leading, all the lines sort of lead back into the bird to, I mean, not the bird, the frog. So that really works well to just direct our eyes straight at the frog. Not giving that one an honours. So this is quite a cool seal just sitting there. The way it's got flippers, it looks like it's just leaning up against the bar. And I'm not sure where this was taken from, whether it was from a boat or on the land, or you had the choice of it. But just imagine how good that would be if you could have got a wee bit lower and the seal was looking sort of straight at your eye level, and then all that background would all just go to blur out. So even with that, it's that if you can get down right down to their level, it really adds intimacy. But as it is, it's quite a cool photograph and a cool looking subject. That one gets a merit. We've got a macro subject here, which they're very tricky to do. It's quite hard because we end up with such a shallow depth of field. And for this one, I think we're sort of lacking a bit of focus, lacking somewhere to look, like the eyes of the spider are not quite sharp, and maybe it's a wee bit dark underneath. So it's probably a bit of, presumably it's natural light and handheld. you'll find most people that get into macro photography will start using flash and using building diffusers and putting them on their flash and using those even in daylight, because you can get a much greater amount of light, and it's a very sharp, fast duration, so it takes out any camera movement as well. And then it may actually also help to get some light in underneath where all the action's happening, because it's a wee bit dark down there to be able to see through. So I've given that one an acceptance. It's a nice detail on this, on the cap of this fungi, nice colour of the nice red, and that complements nicely with the green background. The wee bit of lichen tufting up on the front is a wee bit of a distraction. And that could be one of those situations where you could, instead of pulling that out, you might be able to just fold it over, lie it down, put something on top of it while you take your photograph, and then remove it, and it'll just grow back up into place again. But for all that, it's nice and sharp, so we get some merit. Nice detail on the blackbird. The blackbird's nice and black. It's the male blackbird, nice and black. But it's not so black that we've lost detail. We can still see like what I'd call the shoulder or the top of the wing, and the eyes. It's quite nice. Probably my detraction probably is this is almost into that half and half situation where there's lots going on in the background that's quite messy and just sort of detracts from looking at the bird a wee bit. So blackbird shouldn't be too hard to find, so you can keep trying with a blackbird. Let's probably just go for quite a simple background to it. It's an acceptance. But we can see the beautiful colours of the care, the yellows and the nice reds. It's doing something, it's feeding on something. We can see the whole bird. It's quite good. It's possibly lit with flash, which is okay, but if you can manage to, if you have used flash, it looks like it's been flashed. But birds have this thing where they flash there and back. They have a bit of an unnatural sort of a one-dimensional look. If you can get your flash somehow on a bracket or something a wee bit further away from the axis of your lens, that will certainly help make them look a bit more natural. And I enjoyed the background. The background was muted, and there's even a wee bit of glow just around the top of the head, which gives it a sort of a halo to the bird, which I thought worked well. It's a merit. Trying to pick out patterns in nature is quite a good idea, because there are plenty of them. But the way this one's presented, the ones that are strongest, because our eyes tend to go to the whatever's sharpest and whatever's the highest contrast. And the parts in this photograph with the sharpest and highest contrast are about the 3 bits of whatever it is silhouetted against the sand in the background. But there's no real pattern to it there. Where the pattern is more in the middle. When I look in there, it's sort of not sharp. It's a bit too messy for me to really appreciate the patterns that are going on there. But I did like the way it had been isolated in just a nice clean area of sand. That's an acceptance for that one. And here we've got a nice leading line with the edge of the water. On each side of that line, there's interesting texture in the land and interesting colours and textures and so forth in the water. That part's really nice. And when the line leads round, to some extent, it leads to nowhere, just that area of steam. And then we've got a sky in the background. I did it with my hand just to simplify that one down, is possibly just take the top off and just have that line leading round and finishing in the steam. May make a simpler composition that you may or may not like better. Giving that one a merit. For the shag, you picked a nice spot to be able to look through the trees, or through the 2 bits of green leaves, to actually see the nest the adult bird, the chick. So that works really well. Unfortunately, it's been let down slightly by the focus being on the leaves in the foreground rather than the bird. The bird really needs to be where the sharpness goes, and everything else can fall off. Acceptance. It's really nice that you've managed to catch the bird with some food in its mouth, and where the weta and the beak is nicely against something dark, so the weta is lighter, so you get a nice contrast to look at there. My only sort of bit of a distraction with this, I think possibly there's too much white in the top right-hand side, so I just wonder about cropping down the top and probably turning it into a horizontal, and then that would remove some of that white and may actually bring the focus back more onto the saddleback. A merit. Fantails are tricky birds. It's very hard to get them still and landing in the same spot. So you've done well to actually get a reasonable focused photograph of a fantail. But when you get them in profile like that, I find they tend to sort of somehow become a bit unbalanced, because you've got the big, I'd say, mass of the bird, but it's probably incredibly light, but the tail feathers are even lighter. So to me, it's not quite balanced. It's probably everything's a bit, I often say you need space for the bird to move into, so it probably needs a wee bit more space out to the left-hand side to be really balanced. And while you are pretty close to the bird's level here, if you could had time and think about even getting lower, you get more, and that would have taken away that lighter line of the top of the back of a seat or whatever it is, so that would negate that to a large extent, that white bit in the background. Acceptance. I'm just thinking that judging digital images is always hard, because even how I look at this slide I'm in now looks different to what I did earlier on. So even so it's a calibrated screen, the surrounding light makes a difference. When I first looked at it, it looked quite dark, and the sky was unnaturally blue, and there was a bit of grey into the birds. But now I'm looking at it a bit smaller too, to fit everything on my screen. I was going to say, just make sure you get your whites nice and white, because this was a bit of the same, that the whites on the body where there was a bit of grey in there, and if you could just boost the exposure and get them nice and white, that would have lightened up the sky a wee bit. But looking at it now, maybe that's not too bad. But anyway, I think your rules say you have to title your slides with the name of the subject, and you haven't done that with untitled, so I've passed this one in. The cicada's very nicely done. I quite like the idea of seeing one hanging upside down rather than round the other way. The focus is through the body part and just behind the eyes. That's all nicely sharp. There's reasonable detail out through the wings to see the veins in the wings. The eyes probably not quite sharp, but we don't have enough depth of field to do that unless you start focus stacking. You can't actually get all of a cicada in focus when it's this big in the frame. So that's not a detriment, and the background is muted, but it gives an idea of where they live. So I've given that one a merit. No, I enjoyed this one, the way the very background was quite dark, and then we end up with I assume it's some sort of flower that's quite fluffy and bright, and we've got a couple of bright spots on the flower, and with those two bright spots on the flower and then the bright yellow of the wing of the butterfly, that gives us sort of a nice sort of triangle of bright spots to look at in the center of the frame quite nicely, and that wing that's perpendicular to us is nice and sharp. So we're looking at just we can see the wing detail really well. The body detail is a bit darker. We couldn't do much about that. Otherwise we'd start blowing out highlights in the flower. So I did quite enjoy the way that photograph has been put together. There's enough information there from a natural history point of view to see what that butterfly looks like. Sort of highly commended. Here we've got a white heron just sitting there, relaxed, got 1 foot up. That's always a good sign, shows the bird is relaxed. It's not too worried about the photographer being there. And it's just a very nice standard portrait of a heron. Just the skies, and it's a nice cloudy day, nice interesting colour, wee bit of texture in the sky. Sitting up on, I don't know, it looks like the roof of something. And there's a wee bit of texture in there as well. So it gets a merit. I've been going on about getting at the level with the bird and not looking down on them. Here we've gone the other way. We're slightly looking up at the pigeon, which tends to distort its shape a wee bit. But we get away with it in this one because the pigeon has, even though we're looking at its back, it's got a nice head turn back to us. So we get the contact of the eye, and then the feathers are slightly ruffled. So there's nice texture and colours and everything in the plumage of the pigeon. And even then that colours and thing are almost matched with the colours of the highlights in the background. So it does work quite well. So I've given that one a highly commended. Probably in this one, it's probably about the light again. Because we've got some brighter bits shining on leaves and something in the background, makes the bee look a bit dark in comparison. So it probably needs just a wee bit more light to really lift so we can see the detail in the body. Down the thorax is not too bad, and the wings is quite good sharpness, but maybe up in the body we're not quite so good. I've given that one an acceptance. I consider this one more of a pattern shot. And there's quite, it is quite an interesting pattern with all the bigger wee buds to the side, and then as they come around, all the stalks lead into the center to smaller ones. I would have possibly liked to see how that would look if you got in there and just lifted the highlights to lighten up all the buds to give it a wee bit more contrast. That may improve it. But I think cultivated plants aren't allowed in natural history, so this one also gets passed in. I did enjoy the contrast between the red and the green leaves, and the leaves down the left-hand side and the right-hand side, there's really nice rich colours in there, but that's been let down a wee bit in the middle. There's probably just too much glare off the leaves from the sky. So it's sort of that it loses the richness that it has on the corners. If that richness could have been carried right through the frame, it would have been really quite nice. And it's either chances of doing it a different day when the light direction is a wee bit different, but a polarizer may be able to use a polarizing filter to take some of that sheen off the leaves, just to let those colors shine through like they do on the outside edges. An acceptance. So we can see here, it's quite good with you've got 3 birds, even though one's got his back to us, we still managed to see the heads and all the birds. We can see they're getting in there. The one in the back, you can see where it's really pulling away at the seal. So it's all about the vultures, and you do mention the seal, but it would have been quite, I don't know how long you were there and how much opportunity you had to play around, but it would have been quite nice to be able to see details of the seal as well, rather than it being hidden by that vulture in the foreground. I've given that one a merit. It wouldn't be a nature show without a tui on flax, would it? It's a very common subject, and it's a great fun to try and get out there and try and get something clean because they move around quite fast. So this one's quite good. We've got the whole bird. We can see everything right from tip beak down to the tail. We can see the feet on the flax stalk. So that's very nice. It's all good. The background's good. Bit of texture in the background, but nothing that's going to annoy us back there. Maybe the only thing could be just a slight bit more light on the face, but there is enough light. There's a catch light in the eye, so you can see where the eye is. This one gets a merit. It's a very simple composition, but it does show us we've got nice focus right through the underside of the wing. So this is really a story about showing what the underside of a wing of a godwit looks like. And for that, it's been done very well. It's taken on a sunny day, and often sunny day photographs of birds in flight can be tricky because you get an awkward shadow coming across the body. But this one, there is a shadow there, but it's quite muted and in no way distracting. And a merit. Another subject with lots of character in its skin, and this has been quite well handled to see all those textures and bumps and all the spines down the back and down the back of its head. So the tuatara has been done pretty well. You can see the feet out. We can see everything about it. And being lighter, it moves away from the darker background. The leaves coming in from the left may be a slight distraction, but we can't have everything under our control. So sometimes we have to live with the imperfections and let them add to the story. That one's a merit. Now I've got another tui on flax. This one's probably more graphical, more graphic design with the way the flax stalk's coming up and all the flowers coming off and the tui sitting on it. But to get away with it's done against a very white sky, which can work. But for that to work really well for me, I'd have to see the bird and everything being super crisp. So it really stands out from the white. Whereas at the moment, it's possibly not quite crisp enough and tends to sort of blend into the white a wee bit. Given that one an acceptance. And this is another example of finding patterns in nature, and there certainly are patterns in spider webs, especially if you can get them with dewdrops on them. It adds a lot more to it as well. And I looked at this one for a while just to try to see which part of the patterns I like. And I decided I really like the top left of the image, and sort of I wondered if maybe we didn't even need the bottom and the right hand side, and that would allow us to really get in and look at all those patterns and triangles and water drops there. And that one an acceptance. And of course rules are always there to be broken. This time we're actually looking down at a bird a wee bit more than looking horizontal to it. But the advantage of this looking down angle is you can get it perfectly at right angles to those outspread wings and get them in a nice plane where you can get everything in focus. So the wings all nice and crisp and in focus. There's lots of detail and patterns in the wings and all the different feathers. The head's in focus. And then we get to see the water. And I like the fact that the water in the background mimics the colours of the feathers in the bird's wing. So I think that worked really well. I did enjoy that photograph. I've given that one an honours. And we've got another one of these fantail shots where it's possibly a wee bit too cropped and the balance goes wrong because the light tails doesn't quite match up with the body, a bit like the other one. Probably could do with a wee bit more room off to the left. But I think possibly you need a wee bit more shutter speed as well, because these things fit around and I can see movement in the head. And I can see this movement in there, and I can see that because I can see the catch light has moved. The catch light isn't a nice pinpoint, it's a wee bit of a streak that implies it's hasn't been caught quite fast enough with the shutter. And then acceptance for that one. And so we're getting down to the level of the bird again, which is good. And someone's pushing it here a wee bit by putting sort of almost an awkward place to put the bird off to the left-hand side, not much room to move there. But in this case, you get away with it because the head's turned back towards us and turned back into the frame. So I can handle the bird being in that part of the frame. The one wee thing that lets it down is just the wee. And these things get pretty minor, but they're the kind of things you got to think about to get better as time goes on, is how there's a light stick just coming out of its head. It's a bit like the lamppost behind a person's head when you're taking a portrait. Giving that one a merit. And the shag's nice and sharp. It's got a decent sized fish. So it's got that added extra. It's a nice muted, clean background. So the bird really stands out from that. We've just got a wee bit of weight that shows movement. I just hope you've got the photos of it swallowing that fish as well, with it throwing it about and things like that. Hope you're saving that up for something competition that's really good, really big. We'll give that one a merit. Even though there's action in this, there's birds moving. This is also another almost a pattern photograph. And I did enjoy looking at this one just because there's just a mass of birds and things, but you just go through around and spend your time picking out the individual birds that are in focus and try and find one which is all nice and clean. You know, I see you've called it a murmuration. I had to look up that to see if you actually, well, I thought murmurations was for starlings. The dictionary tends to say that murmurations generally are starlings, but it certainly is very much like a murmuration. I've given that one a highly commended. I like the idea of this with a simple subject and using a real shallow depth of field, so the background just disappears off to nothing, but we can give a nice impression of it. But for this to work, I think we'd need all of the shell in focus. And with a shallow depth of field, that actually becomes very difficult. But if you were going to choose only part of the shell to be in focus, I think I'd prefer it to be the leading edge rather than the trailing edge. And another idea, if you wanted to get really carried away, would be to still keep that aperture wide open to get the shallow depth of field, but focus stack the shell so you can get the shell all in focus, but you still have that nice fall off into the background. That could work quite well. As it is at the moment, I've given this one an acceptance. This does a good job of showing the habitat where these fungi grow, how they grow in big groups. So it's not about the individual fungi or getting in close to the groups. It's just showing the habitat where they grow, and it's done that quite well. With that, I've given it an acceptance. This is another photograph I quite enjoyed. I like the way there's lots of things to start with. We've got that mist in the middle, which was steam, which is a nice light area. And then we've got a natural vignette with the darker foliage to the edge on that top corner. We've got dark water, and we've got a line at the edge going through with vertical green, still alive trees vertically. And then we've got these series of horizontal bleached branches. receding back right through to the background with some upright ones. I did enjoy that photograph. I've given it, what did I get it? I gave that one an honours. It's a nice colourful bird with a nice head turned towards us, nice catch light in the eye, and to make it more than just a bird on a stick, it's got some food in its mouth, which certainly adds to it. And that's complemented by just one of those backgrounds that is, there's nothing distracting in there. It just highlights the subject. Highly commended. This is almost one of those camouflage shots where you're looking at something and the subject is almost camouflaged into the background. So the colours are somewhat similar to the fungi, to the warm colours of the leaves. And then when I first looked at it, I started to think that wee stick that was lying in the fungi, I started to think, well, maybe that should have been plucked out. But then afterwards I thought, well, maybe no, I think I actually quite like it being there, because that gives us something a point to look at, to then continue to look around in the rest of the thing. So it gives us a focal point to the photograph, I think. So I've given that one a highly commended. So we've got nice dark edges around this photograph that really brings us into the group of fungi, and it's taken at such a nice angle that we can see under the gills. We can see good detail there. So I think it's a good photograph of these fungi for a merit. This is a good effort trying to get a bee in flight. It's been very well done, and I like the colours of the background match up with the bee. That's a good effort at a bee in flight, and there's a nice catch light in the light, and we can see the wing and all the pollen or nectar that it's been collecting on its legs. Acceptance. And I think that's it for that section, isn't it?
It is indeed. We'll move on to our A grade open section. Once I find it, here it is. And a quick run through of that section.
Yeah, we're on the final stretch now, not too many in this section. This one, with the crab, the way it's all covered in mud, it's hard to actually get much detail out of it to know what we're looking at. And then we've got a bit of white water in the background, which is lighter than the crab, which tends to make me look past it. I know this is what they look like, but yeah, I think we might have liked to have seen some eyes or something in there. I think would have maybe something to catch just to make me look at it. I've given that one an acceptance. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened here. I think with landscapes, I'd expect the landscapes and the hills to be nice and crisp. I'm not sure whether it's the atmospheric conditions on that day, there was too much going on and you couldn't see, or it's not quite in focus. I would have liked something a bit crisper in there, I think. But that said, because there is some nice light on that hills, if we could actually accentuate that, the shadowing and the warm light on the hills is certainly would something to attract the eye. Acceptance. But looking through, we are looking through, but that grid is almost, to me, it's almost a bit too much for me. I can't quite see through to see what's going on in the background. And possibly I would have liked to have seen pointing down, so the people in the distance, they're not so chopped off. It would have probably quite liked to have seen them. But I really love the person just sitting in the corner. I think that really adds to it. So because of that, that's sneaking up to a merit. Here we've got some lovely autumn colours. We've got those sort of muted browns of the water, and on top of that we've got 3 major leaves, all slightly different colours, going through to the biggest, brightest, sharpest one is the lightest one. So that's where we get drawn to and spend most of our time looking, and then wander around and just enjoy all those autumn colours. Merit. So we've got lots of people, lots going on here. It gives an idea of the market. It's done. It's quite muted colours, but I think it's the panorama's okay. But what I wonder about is there's almost too much empty pavement at the bottom, which sort of makes me feel distracted from the market. Maybe taking that would give taking it even more of a pano and taking a bit more of the pavement off the bottom would bring you closer to the people and make it move a bit more intimate, I think. Let's get some merit. This certainly is soft and subtle. Most of the real part of focus is really a bit too close to the edge for me. And I just wonder if we could even increase that soft subtlety by even lifting the exposure a little bit more and brightening it up. Maybe that would make it even more ethereal. That one, an acceptance. I really enjoyed the backlighting on this to give the nice rim of light around the girl's hair and face. And the way the head has been placed against the darker background works well to really accentuate that. I think it's just quite a lovely wee scene of the girl and her dog and picking flowers. Giving that one an honours. There's some potential for some nice colour and textures in the body of the horse. But I think for that to really come across to me, I think the whole thing needs to be a wee bit sharper. Just sort of the focus just isn't quite there for some reason. And then acceptance. This is a lovely example of differential focus where the center of the flower is just beautifully sharp. And then that's framed by all the drooping petals to frame that, which is in turn framed by the nice green background with just a nice light glow to sort of highlight and contrast the center of the flower and nice dark edges. I enjoyed that flower study, and I've given that one my 3rd place.
And our last section, A grade creative.
But enjoyed this photograph. It's been done. It's by tipping your camera up and pointing upwards, you get your converging verticals, which has worked really well with it. But 2 outside buildings surrounding the street lamp. And the street lamp is almost perfectly done, so it doesn't actually touch the building. A slight movement, so this lamp didn't touch the right-hand building would have helped it. And then we've got another interesting third building. So I think that's all been designed and fits together very well. And I'm sure the image on its own would have been quite nice, but the treatment doesn't detract from it, possibly adds to it. The treatment is quite nice. So I enjoyed that creative effort. I've given that one an honours. And I also enjoyed the elements that have been put together into this photograph as well. The two swans flying off, taking off, troubling up the water by making a few splashes underneath the bridge. You can tell there's a bridge of some sort there but there's several arches. And then there's an interesting diagonal line, and then an interesting sky with a lighter part of the sky, but it doesn't go to the edges with nice darker surroundings. So I thought that was quite a good attempt at something creative as well. And I've given that one a highly commended.
Fantastic.
I think that's it, isn't it?
I believe that is it. What we normally do at this stage is we do a run through of our honours and of the people who have received honours who are here. We just have them say a few quick words. I also want to quickly select that first placement as well before I forget. But we'll do the quick run through first, and then as we go through and talk about it, I'll make sure to make that placement. Okay. Oh, sorry, bear with me. Control Y.
And this is just taken.
Oh, sorry.
I do online photography now, just with my phone. And that's just a check the end of last year. Christmas market cruise and one. That was in Strasbourg, I think. And I just like the but you know, just snaps and things on it. So yeah, it's just I just like the like the design of bodies coming together and
Hopefully you guys heard that.
The story of the evening so far is also on my phone. That's Queen of the that's Queen of the Stone
This one obviously it's Mamuka Forest. There's quite a few swamps up there. This was taken about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and just been a massive downpour. And then the mist, you just see the mist in the background.
Yeah.
Going up. And I just thought, obviously done on a tripod, I think shot like that. I saw 50.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, that was just out at Miranda, and I spent ages watching these birds, thinking what they have to be doing, just pushing to the water, and then they jump up in the air, and then come back out again. So I spent a couple of hours watching them, and then got that wrong in mid-jump.
Well done.
You've got one for
Miranda.
Another one, it's just out from the Minnesota Harbour.
We'll send you running foot. I think that was my first day event project.
Well done. I think that one's Linda's. Okay.
Yeah, this is taken on a full day excursion out on the water, and that's in 4 nights time. And this is a New Zealand storm people report last seen in 1902, and somebody spotted in the in 2003.
Wow.
And they miss on Puturu to the Barrow Island, that's the only known nesting place at the moment. As with the white-faced storm people, they put the new go up last month. This is the same sort of deal. They flutter and dance on the water, and the wood just push them up off the water. And they flutter along and skeleton up the surface.
I'm not sure whose that one is. Anyone? No?
This one here, this it's in obviously in a thermal area, just up the top end of town. And I was just walking through, it's a handheld shot this, and I thought, that reminds me of a Led Zeppelin album. And I thought, I gotta get it. And there we are.
And you did a good job of it. Right, and that's it. Oh, try do the name thing. It didn't work for me. Yeah, I don't know which. I'm not sure which one does the run through with the names. That one.
Sure, it's control one. Show on as
That's the one where it kept going to Rollins and then going off.
Yeah. Yeah, just use the space bar to hold it down.
So we're just quickly running through with names so people know who took what. Robin was in the group. Did you want to chat about this at all, Robin? Oh, sorry. If you're able to unmute yourself, if you're still there. I can't see the screen, so I'm not sure. Okay, Robin might have gone. That was Pauline Smith. I believe that's it. Thank you, everyone. I think Chief will say a few more words.
Thank you very much, Craig. We really appreciate your efforts, especially on such short notice. I didn't realise when I was asking you to do it that I was dumping it in Easter either. So I, under the circumstances, really appreciate the short notice effort that you put in for us, and that was wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch with something to say thank you for your time and trouble, and we hope you enjoyed working your way through those images.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see what's done in other places, parts of the world. See a few places I recognise. I thought some of those might have been Miranda.
Indeed. Okay, well, we'll let you get away. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Craig.
Okay, see ya.
See ya.
Awesome. And I believe that's us, so we can sign off now.